The first question which is going to come in front of us is what is the difference between method overloading and overriding? So this is a pretty easy question. It has been asked multiple times in all the interviews, and it is a very general question as well. So the basic difference is that in method overloading, multiple methods have different method signature, but they have the same name. Okay, methods have same name, but they have different signatures. That is what is called as your method overloading. Now, what do I mean by signature? The signature basically means the name with the parameters. So two methods can have the same name. Both the methods cannot have the same parameters. The parameters needs to be either different or the number of parameters should be different. That is what your method overloading is. And when we talk about your method overriding, then basically we come into the part of your parent and child concept, where we have to talk about, we have a parent class in which we are defining a method, and then we are defining the same method in the child class as well. Now here the method signature will also be same. That means the number of parameters and the name will, both the things will be same. That is where the things are, and that is what is called by your method override. That is the difference between overloading and overriding. Let me just show this to you with the help of an example as well. So as you can see that I have made or written two methods here. This is the class car. Both the methods are having the same name, define a variable, isn't it? But one of the methods is having a different parameter, isn't it? That is what your method overloading is. So the method should have different parameter, but if I keep the name also as same, let's say I'm going to delete this. So this is not acceptable. This is not method overloading. Why? Because here the signature, the method signature, that means the name plus your parameters have become same. So that thing is not possible. That is not what your method overloading is. So method overloading, what do we mean? It basically says that the name should be same but the parameter should be totally different. That is what your method overloading is. And similarly, if I talk about your method overriding, so in that what happens generally is, and now you can see that this is an example where the class is animal, and then we have another class which is dog. So dog is basically extending your animal class. So in your animal class, then the method name is, let's say, the type of sound, isn't it? And here as well we have a method called as type of sound. So both these classes are having the same name as well as the parameters, right? And still it's not throwing the error. So this kind of example can be is going to go for your method overriding part, getting it? So it always happens inside your parent class, which is your animal, and a child class. So always a parent and a child class can have methods with same method signature. That is what is called as your method overriding. So can we create an object of a final class? Whenever the final keyword is used with any item in Java, the item cannot be modified anymore. So this involves final classes, variables, methods, everything. So the final class cannot be extended by any other class and cannot be modified. A final variable cannot be reassigned another value, and a final method cannot be overridden. So yeah, we can of course create the object of a final class, but we cannot modify it anymore. That is what your final class is. The next question is, what is an abstract class? So in Java, abstract classes is a class which cannot be instantiated. That is what your abstract classes are. If you see this example here, we have this abstract class. The name itself I have given as abstract class only. Always you have to make the class, or you have to write down the keyword abstract as well as soon as you are creating any abstract class. The good part about an abstract class is that you can have methods which will only be declared. So you don't always need to write down the implementation necessarily. What you can do is, if let's say there is a method which might be, you can say, implemented in various classes in a different way, then you can just mention it as an abstract method like this one, and then you can extend this abstract class in another class like this, what I have done, and then you can go ahead and implement it. So that is one use of your abstract classes, and that is why people generally use it as well. Let us move to our next question now. So next question says that, what is the difference between interface and an abstract class? So this question is mostly asked in the interviews, guys, and it is a very tough question as well. There are many differences between interfaces and an abstract class, so we'll start with the interfaces first. You can say that interfaces can be thought of as rules in Java, okay, which works as a common understanding document among various teams in software development. Interfaces also gives you the idea about what is to be done and not about how it will be done. So implementation completely depends upon the developer by following the given rules. Whereas your abstract classes contain abstract declaration, concrete implementations, or both. So what do we mean by that? Generally your abstract class can have the implemented methods as well. Like we can actually have a method which we can implement. It is not mandatory that we always go ahead with the unimplemented method. But in interfaces, you cannot have the methods implemented. All the methods are by default abstract. You don't need to mention this abstract keyword as well, and none of the methods will be implemented. So if you try to do so, it will throw an error. That is not allowed. And all the variables which are declared inside your interfaces are always to be final, which is not the case with your abstract classes. And then of course the major one is your class generally extends the abstract class while a class implements the interface. Let us move with the other question now. How can you force garbage collection in Java? So generally you cannot force the garbage collection in Java. However, one can call the system.gc method. So there is a method called as system.gc to give hint to garbage collector that you want it to do the collection. Okay, so that is what the thing is. So the next question which comes into picture is, what is the purpose of garbage collection in Java and when it is used? The purpose of garbage collection in Java is to automatically remove the objects when they are no longer needed by the application, so that the resources can be reused and the memory can be saved from getting exploited. Then the next question is again, what is the different way of using a thread? So we have two basic methods of using threads. First one is you're extending the thread class, other one is the implementation of the runnable interface. So you can see that first method we are extending the thread class here, and in the second one we are implementing the runnable interface. So in this way you can start using the thread. Of course, this is how we generally create the thread. We use the object and we can give the runnable interface as well. Of course, this is just an implementation of anonymous inner classes through which you can create the object of thread. So moreover, these are the two ways in which you can start creating the threads. Now let us move on to the next question. What is the use of super keyword? So super keyword is used to refer to the parent class members inside the child classes. So you can use super keyword to generally refer to the parent class variables or maybe methods. If you have to use them inside the child classes, you can do so. Because generally in inheritance, it means that we can use all the parent class properties and methods inside the child class, right? So that is what we will be doing. So that is what your super keyword also means to describe the wrapper classes in Java. Each of the primitive data types in Java has a class named after it, which are called as your wrapper classes. These classes are used to convert the primitive data types into objects. That is what your wrapper classes are. What is synchronization? So synchronization is the process through which we do not allow multiple threads to work on the same resource at the same time. So it is a process to actually it is a process in which we generally do not allow multiple threads to work over the same resource at the same time, because threads are going to work parallelly, right? So we need to, if let's say both threads have to share a single resource, then we need to at least make that resource available to one thread once, and then only it should be available to the other, or that can be achieved with the help of synchronization. So what is a deadlock? A deadlock in simple words is a situation where one thread waits for the other one to execute while the other one waits for the first thread to execute. Both the threads are waiting for each other to get executed first, but since both of them are just waiting for each other to get executed, it just goes inside the deadlock situation. It has been explained by the picture here. You can see that it is a road, or we have four crossroads here where the traffic is coming and traffic is going as well. Or this is the kind of deadlock here, right? Each of these cars are actually they are waiting for the other car to move, but the other car is still waiting for another car to move. So in this way, everybody is waiting for someone and nobody is actually able to move. That is what your deadlock situation is. Then we have another question. The question is, what is the difference between vector and array list? Every method present in array list is non-synchronized. Every method which is present in linked list is synchronized. At a time, multiple threads are allowed to operate on array list object, and hence array list is not a thread safe. It is not thread safe, of course. And your vector, at time only one thread is allowed to operate on the vector object, and it is thread safe. Threads are not required to wait to operate on array list. Hence, relatively performance is high. Threads are required to wait to operate on the vector object, and hence relatively low performance is there. And also, ArrayList was introduced in 1.2 version and is not a legacy class, whereas your vectors were introduced in 1.0 version and it is a legacy class. These are certain differences between your ArrayList and vector list. What is the differences between string builder and string buffer? So string buffer is a thread safe or synchronized, that is multiple thread cannot access simultaneously, whereas your string builder class is not thread safe, and that is multiple thread can access at the same time. The string buffer methods are synchronized and string builders methods are not synchronized. String buffers were introduced in 1.0 version while your string builders were introduced in 1.5 version. String buffer performance is low, the performance is pretty much higher in the string builder part. The performance is high in string builder. So what is a map? A map is an interface in Java which is extended by hash map, tree map. It is used to map keys with values. Each key in a map has a value attached to it. So example of a hash map can be something like this. This is the object here of a map which we are going to create, and this is the hash map which we are creating. The data type of the key will be string, data type of your value will be an integer. The variable name is HS. Through this only we are referring to the hash map. Okay, and this is how the things are. Then the next question is, what are checked and unchecked exceptions? So unchecked exceptions extends runtime exception class, and it is a type of exception which is generally caught during the runtime of a program. Checked exceptions extend compile time exceptions, and they are exception which is during the compile time of the codes. So unchecked exceptions are something which are caught during the runtime, whereas your checked exceptions are something which is caught during the compile time of the code. So that is what these type of exceptions are. Now unchecked exceptions, they generally extend the runtime, whereas your checked exceptions, they extend the compile time exceptions. The next question which comes here is, what is the collection API? So collections in Java are used to store groups of objects. It provides a number of interfaces like maybe list, map, collection itself, set, iterable, to define a standard way of using the range of certain data structures in Java. The interfaces and classes of the collection API belong to java.util packaging. What is the difference between java.util.list and java.util.set? So difference between java.util.list and set is that these are two different interfaces in Java and they are used for two separate data structures. Both the interfaces contain different list of methods which is implemented in a very different way in the class. That is generally the difference between your list and set. Both these are interfaces and they are going to be used in a different way once they'll be extended by some other classes. Okay, example can be hash set, array list, like that. What is the difference between throws and throw? So throw and throws are two different keywords in Java and with two different functionalities. Now your throw is used to give an instruction to throw an exception deliberately. So basically you'll be using the throw keyword to throw the exception deliberately, while your throws is used to declare that the method might throw the specified exception. So you can see here that this is the example of throws and throw. So throws is generally used with the method, and generally what happens here is that in throws you'll have to mention the name of the exception is arithmetic exception here, and throw keyword is used for deliberately throwing an exception. So if you have to deliberately throw an exception, you go with throw. And if you're trying to implicate, or if you're trying to say that maybe a method might throw an exception, then you go ahead with the throws keyword. So this is basically the difference between the two keywords. Okay, now what are the different types of statements in Java? So we have three different types of statements in Java. We have only statement, then we have prepared statement, and then we have callable statement. The function of all these are totally different, and then that's how the thing is. Now the next question which we are going to have a talk about is, what is a servlet? So in simple words, a servlet is a class that handles the incoming requests, processes them, and replies back with a response. As an example, we can use a servlet to collect input from a user through an HTML form, query records from a database, and we can create web pages dynamically. The next question is that what do we understand by a container? So what is a servlet container? A servlet container is an application server, okay, which uses a specific version of Java servlet specification. So in simple words, the servlet allows the developer to write components, for example servlets, which can process the requests easily, and it will help us in writing down the application in a much more easier way. So those components can then be defined to the container, and it handles many of the tedious tasks involved with wiring up and managing those components such that they can process those requests. That is what a container is. So which are the scripting elements in JSP? The scripting elements in JSP, there are basically 5 scripting elements in JSP. The first one is your comment, in which we generally put the comment. This is not generally read by the compiler, and that is what your scripting tag comment means. Then we have a directive, that means angular brackets with a percentage tag is included. After that you can import a number of classes using @ and all those things. Then we have a declaration tag as well. We have scriptlet. This is the most famous one and most widely used one as well. Using the scriptlets only, you generally try to write down the Java coding inside your JSP. So whatever thing is written in core Java, you generally write it inside the scriptlet. Then what else do we have? We have expression. So in expression, what happens is that we have angular brackets, and after that we have to use an equals to. So the equals to basically says that you can use an expression in Java and JSP. Next question is that what are the types of comments in JSP? So basically there are two types of comments in JSP. We have hidden comments, then we have output comments. Hidden comments are those comments which are not processed by the JSP engine. Output comments are those which are not hidden and they appear in the output. So they come as a body, and whatever you write in the comment part, it will be coming inside or coming as an output, while your hidden comments, they will not be shown to the user. The next question is that what are the lifecycle methods of JSP? So we have 4 lifecycle methods of JSP. We have compilation, initialization, then we have execution, and then we have cleanup. So in compilation, the code is generally compiled, then the things are generally initialized, the variables, the classes, and then after that the execution happens, and post execution the cleanup happens, where the garbage collector basically takes all the things. Next question is that what is a deployment descriptor? So a deployment descriptor is a file which carries the configuration details of a web application in servlets. We have the web.xml as the deployment descriptor. It contains an artifact that is deployed to some container. It contains details about how an application should be deployed. So if you see here, if you go to the web content part in this, generally in the web.inf you will be seeing a web.xml file. In this web.xml file, what do we have? You can see that this is the deployment descriptor file. This is your deployment descriptor file in any servlet application. The web.xml defines what will be the index file, what will be the first page, of course, and after that this file itself will be telling that where exactly the request has to go to get processed. That means it will be redirecting the request to the respective servlet. So that is what your deployment descriptor is. Then the next question is, what is a session? Can you share a session object between different threads? A session in Java means a due amount of time. However, one can use a session tracking to maintain the state of a user. It is also known as session management and servlet. Now see, what do we mean by session? Session basically says that generally what happens, a user has to pass the data to the server, and let's take up an example, a simple one. Let's say that there is a user who wants to log into Facebook and then he wants to use it. So generally there will be a lot of servers, isn't it? A lot of servers will be there. Of course, Facebook will be having or launching up many servers because the user load is quite high. Now as soon as the request will be going to that particular, maybe it is going to a server 1, and where the request is processed and this user has logged in. Now next time, maybe, or once the user logs in, he does some activity which again creates or generates a request which goes to the server, right? But we don't actually know that which server it will be going on. So who is going to keep a track of what the user was doing? Because at the end, to whatever server the user will be going or the request will be going, that server needs to know that okay, he has already logged in, he is clicking upon this particular link. There exactly comes the use of session. So using session, you can say, or you can track a user. You can give a particular ID to a user. Whenever that user will be going to a particular, and say, server, it will automatically get tracked using the session ID and he will be given the respective response. That is what your session is. We have another question here. What is the difference between the session.get method and session.load method? The difference between get and load method is very minute and technical. The get method includes upon the database if object doesn't exist in session cache, and it returns a fully initialized object which may involve several database calls. Load method can return proxy in place and only initialize the object or hit the database if any method other than getID is called upon persistent or entity object. Next question which comes into the picture is, how can you map the whole class as immutable? So using the final keyword, you can map the whole class as immutable. Just place the final keyword before your class name. Generally your string class is also final. Now what are the steps which are involved in establishing a JDBC connection? Let us have a look over the steps which are required for a JDBC connection. So these are the steps which are required. First of all, you'll have to create up the connection object. Once you have created the connection object, then you have to go ahead with your class.forName method. This class.forName is going to create the object of the driver class. This is the driver class com.mysql.jdbc.driver, the full name of the class I am giving here because it is required, so that your class.forName can create the object for it. Then using the driver manager, we are generally trying to get the connection done here. We'll be giving the URL of our database. In my case, it is MySQL. For Oracle, this will change. For NoSQL also it will change. And then we are going to give the username and the password of our database. So in this way, generally you keep the things, and your class.forName, what it does, of course it creates the object. So all these three things are required. You have to create the connection object, use the class.forName, then you have to use the driver manager and get the connection done. So moreover, this is what you need to do for creating up your JDBC connection. Of course, at the end you'll have to call the connection object to create the connections. Create the object of this class and call this method so that your connection can be created. That is what generally happens once you're trying to go ahead with your JDBC connection. How can one load the drivers in JDBC? To download the connector package in Java of the respective database which you want to use, then you should use class.forName function to load the driver classes. So basically the same is going to load the drivers. Drivers should be already installed. Either you should be installing the package directly inside the whole project, or else you should use Maven to bring that particular dependency in your project. Both the ways it's fine, and you can go ahead with any one of them. So what will class.forName do while loading the drivers? It will create the object of the argument whichever is provided to it. How can you make the connection? Create the connection object and use the driver manager for creating the connection in JDBC. That is how you generally try to create the connection. How do you create JDBC statements and what are they? So JDBC statements are classes which can be used to set up the connection and execute the various database related queries into the database through Java. So if you have to run many queries into the database using Java, you generally use your JDBC statements. So basically there are three types of statements. We have statement, then we have prepared statement, and then we have callable statement. Okay, the next question is that how one can retrieve data from the result set. So generally you use this kind of method to get the data from the result set, and after that you have to use the while loop to basically get the details from the result set. Okay, once you have obtained the database connection with the help of statement object, you can use execute query method to retrieve the data, and once the data has been retrieved inside result set, you can go ahead with using a while loop and getting the data on your own. That is how you generally get the data. You can see here this is a very simple example, and in this example, in this you can see that the result set RS is going to execute the query SQL, and this query SQL is your select star from system.employee, where EID is the EID which is being given in the method, right? Or whatever gets inside here in your result set, you need to use a while loop, go for rs.next, and then print rs.getString, then rs.getString2. So rs.getString1 and getString2, like that. This is how you generally have to go ahead with the result set, fetching the data from a result set. How can you use a prepared statement? Prepared statements are easy to use. You have to create the object of the prepared statements first of all. So this is the way in which I am creating the object here. Then I'm gonna set the string, or you can say the first value as 100, which is integer, and the second value as a string, which is Satan here, right? So what do we have? We have insert into user values. So after that we have given two question marks, right? And after writing this line, then we are writing two other lines to define the question marks which we have written here. So first question mark stands for 100, second question mark stands for Satan. Then you can use this integer I statement.execute update query to basically run this kind of statement, and then you're done with this. So once this program will execute, you would see that the records updated will be printed with the value. This is how you have to use the prepared statement. So what does set autocommit do? Set autocommit is a method through which we generally try to change the automatic commit of a query inside database. Now generally what happens, if you commit to a database through Java, all the changes whatever have been done will be saved. By default, some databases saves the changes done automatically. So you can turn that off or on using the auto commit, using the set auto commit method of the connection interface. So it is in the connection interface. Through this you can do that. How do you call a stored procedure from JDBC? To call a stored procedure through the JDBC, one has to use the callable statement. The callable statement has a method prepare call which would return the procedure. Now the next question is that how do you implement one-to-one, one-to-many relationships while designing the tables? Your one-to-one relationship is designed, and in this what happens generally, the primary key of one table is taken as the unique foreign key of the other table, while in one-to-many we generally take the primary key of one table and as the unique key of the other. This is where your one-to-one and one-to-many comes into picture. Now what is the difference between a primary key and a unique key? So basically both of them provide the same functionality, but your primary key can be applied to only one column in a table, while your unique key can be applied to multiple columns in the same table. Both of them have the same function of keeping the values unique. So the next question is that what are the user defined data types and when do you go for them? User defined data types are something which are designed by the users themselves, and we generally go in for it multiple times. We generally create the classes, we create the interfaces, the abstract classes, all of it. Then what is the maximum size of a row? The maximum size of a row in a database is your 65,536 bytes. Then the next question is that what is the difference between delete table and truncate table commands? So delete command can be used to delete a specific record, while truncate is used to delete the whole table data. What are the JDBC driver types in Java? So in Java we have four types of drivers in JDBC. We have JDBC ODBC bridge driver, then we have native API driver, then we have network protocol driver, and then we have thin driver. So we have four types of driver here: type 1, type 2, type 3 and type 4. These are the types of JDBC drivers which are there in Java. How many types of joins are there in SQL? We have cross join, we have inner join, we have outer join. These are the types of joins which are available in Java. What is the definition of your candidate key, alternate key and composite key in database? So a candidate key is a column or a set of columns that can qualify as primary key in the database. An alternate key is a key associated with one or more columns whose values uniquely identify every row in the table, but which is not the primary key. A composite key is a combination of two or more columns in a table that can be used to uniquely identify each row in the table. When the columns are combined, uniqueness is guaranteed, but when it is taken individually, it does not guarantee the uniqueness. That is what your composite keys are.